let's get into the calendar. All right, let's start with this premise. The calendar in college football is, as a lot of things are in this sport, totally broken. And it has to be addressed. And I think that it will be addressed. I just don't know how long it'll take to be addressed. I'm going to specifically talk about one section of the calendar. There's a lot of things that you can talk about, and we will talk about during the course of the offseason. But one specific area of the calendar I'm going to talk about is that early December and then through December and into January portion of the calendar. So let's talk about those 2 months, December and January, and how they should look different in college football. First, we got to kind of know what's wrong with it or what's broken. And I think that this goes without being said, but let's just say that when you put everything into a blender and then turn it on and like run it all around, that's not good, right? Okay, that just breaks everything. It makes everything messy. And that's what college football does. The first week of December turns into a blender. And nobody can really navigate it all that well. I think that it puts an immense amount of pressure on head football coaches. It puts an immense amount of pressure on the players to make decisions for themselves. And we need to space it out. So let me first define what I'm talking about. When we look at the first week and a half of December, what we have currently in college football is the best teams that are qualifying for the conference championship games are preparing for the conference championship game. Normally, those happen the first week, the first Saturday in December. What also happens is the coaching carousel starts. And I know that carousel is starting earlier and earlier now in the modern college football. But I'm talking about assistants, coaches being hired and fired. So that starts. And even teams that are trying to prepare for games that week, and certainly teams that have qualified for bowl games and start to prepare for bowl games, they're starting to lose assistant coaches. So the carousel presents a lot of chaos there that first week of December. Then, in their infinite knowledge, the NCAA decided like, hey, let's space out the portal and let's make sure that the portal opens December 5th. That's the Monday after the conference championship games. So now the portal opens up and it's just like, boof. It's just like an explosion of players go to the portal. Thousands of players, hundreds of players enter the portal. So you've got that going on. So you can imagine how difficult it is just with that going on. For a head coach, because you're losing kids to the portal. You're also trying to get a leg up in recruiting some of the kids that have entered the portal. You're trying to look at your roster and say, well, how many spots do I have? You know, what's going to go on in recruiting? Oh, and then guess what comes up? The early signing day period. Bam, gets thrown on you as well. So now you've got to finish out your recruiting class because let's face it, it's not early signing day. This is the signing day, the early signing day in December. And so now you've got like all this pressure to try to finish your class, recruit this class. You're dealing with NIL. Now you're dealing with NIL and portal, and you're losing coaches. It's a total mess. It's a total mess. And the season's not even over. Imagine for a moment. Just imagine this for a moment. If you're not driving, like maybe close your eyes. It's the last week of the regular season in the NFL, the National Football League. And it ends. All right. Boom. There we go. Last whistle, in the last week, they all play on Sunday. And here we go. Boom. And then the next day, the coaching carousel starts. Yeah, we're used to that, right? Black Monday. Okay. Then on Tuesday, free agency opens up. Then the following Monday, the draft happens. Of course that wouldn't happen. So why do we do it in college football? That it doesn't make any sense. You can't survive in that chaos. Again, I said it earlier, it's a blender. We took all these things that are supposed to happen at some point in the calendar, we throw them in the blender, and then we just close the lid, and we just like hit the 5. Boof, 5. Who can survive in that? Nobody can survive in that. We're not making smoothies here. Like, come on. Come on. Somebody has got to be smarter than this. We are going to lose really good people and coaches out of this sport because we don't care for the calendar. And the calendar is really important. And I think it's actually much more important than even the college football playoff. But the college football playoff, because that wasn't fixed the right way from the beginning, that's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. And then the NCAA just punted on NIL, so that's sucking all the oxygen out of the room. Then they made terrible rulings and decisions based on portal, when it's open, when it's not, signing day. And so now all of a sudden, and again, this is always the case with the NCAA, they create a mess, then everybody else has to deal with it. So good on you, NCAA. Your calendar sucks. It sucks. And it's driving really good people out of the sport. So we've got to find a way to fix it. And it might take a long time, but I'm going to give some suggestions of how I would start to look at it, because I don't think you can fix it overnight. But I think that there are things that you can do and ways that you can look at this that start to make a little bit more sense and will help people in the sport. Because again, it's about a lot of things. It's about downtime. It's about roster management. It's about the ability to impact positively kids' lives, both future players and current players. So all of this plays into it, and we need to at least pause and take a look at what are the things that we can do with the calendar to make it better. So I've got a couple of suggestions here and then a few points within each suggestion. So let's start. My first point of two would be, number one, finish the season. Okay, so before we get into the portal and before we get into signing high school recruits, finish the season. I think it's absolutely crazy that we don't finish the season before we start signing kids and kids start transferring. Again, the analogy, let's go back to the people that do it best. Does the NFL open free agency the Tuesday after the regular season before the playoffs finish? Do they have the draft the Monday after, 2 Mondays after the regular season finishes before the playoffs finish? Of course not, because that's crazy. So why do we do it in college football? Let's finish the season before we start to think about the roster for next season. I think that's a really important piece. Now, there's I'm sure people will, bring up arguments about semesters in school and all this. Finish the season. So a couple of things that we need to at least think about when it comes to finishing the season. Hold on, I'm going to start coughing on you if I don't get some tea. Ooh, it's hot. It's hot. Yeti performs well. Not even a sponsor. It's just is what it is. Okay. The first thing is it's common sense to just finish the season. I've already described that. The second thing is, I believe that college football would benefit greatly by trying to move themselves away in the calendar from the National Football League, and really twofold. The first would be you move away from their most important games. So you want your valuable television property to be there before the NFL's playoffs begin. Because once you're competing with their playoffs, you are totally in second position, completely in second position as far as windows, days. Why would you do that? I don't think it's very good business to do that. So I don't think we should take this big, massive break before we start the postseason, before we start the expanded playoff, before we start bowl games. There's no reason for that break. And do not come at me with your, well, they've got to have finals. Stop it now, immediately. I'm sorry, I don't buy it one bit. One, that excuse is given exactly 0 times to any other intercollegiate sport, period. So you can't give it for college football. Secondly, I just lived through COVID, and so did all these college kids, in which they were just told to go home, take classes online, do all of these. Like, nope. We have workarounds, and I don't want to hear about finals. I think that the regular season should end and we should move directly into the postseason. We need to finish the season. Okay, you get away from the NFL, both from a valuable inventory standpoint, and you move a player's decision, whether he's going to opt for the NFL draft or not, further toward the college season and less towards that decision. I know I didn't say that all that clearly, but my mind is not working all that well right now. Let me try to rephrase that as best I can. You want players in college football to be thinking about college football and not the NFL. So you want to move the season as far away from their decision point as you can. I think you would probably encourage kids to play, by the way, in their postseason, even in exhibition games. If that were happening in a point in time in the calendar that it was far away from the point where they had to make a decision about the National Football League. So there's number one. Finish the season. It's common sense. You move away from the NFL in a lot of different stances. Then the second thing that we need to wrap our minds around is that you need to space out the chaos. Okay, so all those things that I said were thrown into the blender, those need to space out. Now, it will naturally happen that coaches start getting hired and fired and the carousel kind of begins, both at the end of the regular season and at the end of the postseason. That stuff naturally happens. But we can control when things like the portal are opened up and when things like signing day happens. We should not have 2 signing days. I think that that's crazy. I think it's a failed experiment in many regards. And so what I would like to see is that we finish the season, then we have a period of time in which the portal is open, boom, which is basically like free agency. Then the portal is closed before we have a signing day. You space out the chaos, and it does a lot of different things. First and foremost is that you're giving your coaches the opportunity to focus their attention on one area, not both areas. Okay, so you're serving the potential student athlete, both in the transfer and the high school sense, in both areas, because now you can focus on one or the other based on the calendar. I think that that's very beneficial. The other thing it helps you do is manage your roster. How am I building this roster? Because now more than ever, these rosters are being constructed not on a 4-year rolling basis, but on a year-to-year basis. Some of these programs, the smart ones, are going with a GM model, where someone is there just to build the roster. So you're allowing them to build the roster, know what seats are filled before they go to the high school ranks. So now you're serving both the transfer athlete and the high school athlete. Because when they're all in a blender, sometimes high school kids that should be recruited are not being recruited, and sometimes portal kids that should find a spot don't find a spot. If those are separated out, I think we might mitigate those areas of kids not finding a spot that should be finding a spot.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoy that clip, make sure you click subscribe somewhere down here. From game highlights to exclusive interviews and rankings, we've got everything you need as a college football fan right here, College Football on Fox.